So this is episode 4 of Every Tech Talk, hosting as me, Tony Kim, and then we got Damon Chivers here, a great old instructor that I had at Flatiron School. Really great to have you here, Damon. Thanks for being here.
Really nice to be here, Tony. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Damon. So kind of tell us about your little bit of your background here.
For sure. Well, to give some good content, I guess we'll start from the top a little bit. But I wasn't always in tech. So before becoming a software engineer and joining this journey of things, I was an artist. So you kind of can see I have a piece behind me now. But I've been doing that for about 10 years or so, maybe a little more. And I was in the Navy at some point, and when I was in there, I ended up breaking my leg. And when that kind of happened, I had to figure out what the next move was in life. And so I went on a journey of becoming a graphic designer. So I was actually going to school for that at one point. I got a little bored with it because I have been using Photoshop and stuff to just kind of create in my individual spare time. So I switched to audio engineering. Loved that. It was brand new for me. I was learning a lot. And I was able to record drums and pianos and all this different stuff, voices, and just find something very new. So one thing about me is I love to create and find new outlets. And along that journey, the school I was going to, actually the art institutes, they end up getting shut down by the government. So I had to make a new move. I'm like, okay, I'm not done yet, but I got to figure out what's next. And I could have transferred and kind of continued my journey in that. But that would have been a lot of freelancing as well once I finished. So I wanted something a little more concrete. And luckily for me, I just so happened to have a friend that worked at Dish Network out here in Denver, Colorado. Is where I'm based now. And everybody that worked there were basically coders, right? And I knew nothing about this world. I seen a little bit while doing graphic design, but I really didn't know too much about it. Mm-hmm. And I kept hearing about this place called Galvanize, right? It was a boot camp. And they went there for 6 months. They got out and they were making all this money and they were doing great and they were, stable and established. And it kind of just interests me, right? Like it really piqued my interest. And I'm like, ooh, okay, I could write some words, watch things pop up on the screen. I really enjoyed it, right? And so I started doing some online classes. And once I did some Codecademy, Udemy course here and there. And once I did that, I was like, okay, I'm ready to join the boot camp. So luckily for me, I kind of had some military benefits I could still use. I was running out a little bit, but I was able to fund the boot camp and go through that experience. And honestly, it was super transformative, changed my whole life. It was awesome. I learned JavaScript. I learned pretty much, it was a focus on front end development, but we did do a little bit of back end towards the end. And in there, I just kind of built relationships, and that's what kind of led me to where I am today. That was the journey of how I got into tech.
That's awesome. That's you can make a movie out of that, honestly. That's I would totally go watch it. So count me in. That's awesome. And I know you because you were one of the great instructors at Flatiron School. And so what was that transition like to go from being instructor and then now you're a software engineer? Do you feel like you made the happy move of that transition happening?
Yeah. I guess I should probably give you how I became an instructor. It was it was kind of I don't know. I have these odd experiences sometimes that lead me into great places. But while I was going to Galvanize, I actually was one of the people that was known for being great at CSS, right? So I loved it because it was my way of being able to design still and tap into that creative piece of me. And so they used to call me the CSS guru back there, CSS wizard in my cohort. And one day I had a friend who actually used to be a Flatiron coach as well, long ago before you, Tony. But he actually used to run some learn to code things that Galvanize was doing at the time. It was student led, and you basically would teach HTML or CSS, the very basics. The problem was he wasn't good at CSS. He hated it, right? So he asked me to come down there one time, and he's like, "Hey, will you come and just lead a little CSS workshop? Basically, do whatever you want. Just show people how to do some CSS." I'm like, "All right, cool. Yeah, I'll come down. I'll do it." I get there when the time comes, And apparently, for like the next 3 hours, I have a room to myself. I didn't know it was gonna be this long. I thought it was like 30 minutes quick. The next 3 hours, I got like a room to myself with people that's gonna come in and out, and basically, I have to run 1 hour workshops on CSS. I had no plan. I just was like, all right, I'm gonna make something up as we kind of go. So I like built something on the fly in 10 minutes. And then I was basically leading a class of people for an hour. And then I take a break, do it again for an hour, take a break, do it again for an hour. In that time frame, I met a guy named Josh Cooper. He was running the marketing at that time. Tony, you know Josh. Josh actually was our campus director at Flatiron.
Oh, yeah, I have. Yeah.
So actually, from being a student and leading those classes, I actually start kind of being asked to lead more in different places. Like I did at the Boulder Galvanized thing, I did some animation things, and eventually I had this connection. Right, I met Josh back in those times, and whenever Flatiron came about in Denver, Josh was actually leading the thing. I talked to him. We ended up getting me involved in that interview process, and so I became a coach over there. Right. Um, in that time frame of being a coach, about 3 months in or so, they're looking for a second lead instructor. Kyle Cobley was the first one. He amazing teacher, and he was looking for somebody else to help him out on that front. And I had been doing really well teaching. I didn't know Ruby, which was one of the things that Flatiron was teaching, and so I was spending every day diving into Ruby as well as teaching classes on Ruby while I'm still learning it. Right.
Yeah.
And it was intense, and I was a little overwhelmed sometimes. But in that first 3 months, they decided that why keep looking for a lead instructor with all this experience when I was there, essentially.
Yeah.
And it was I was like super honored for them to think that, but I kept thinking there is no way that I'm about to be a lead instructor. I just graduated not long ago. I've only been teaching for who knows how long now, but a few months. I wasn't ready, right? But I was, because I have a lot of confidence. So I was like, I can do it, but it's scary, right? And anyways, I became the first coach to lead at Flatiron School. They created a track for coaches where you would end up basically going through some different trainings and meeting with other lead instructors to become a lead instructor yourself. And I was the first one to go through that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which was pretty awesome. And then eventually, I became a lead. Tony, you ended up coming through, as well as almost 300 other students that I was able to teach at that time. And yeah, that was kind of the journey of becoming an instructor.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I gotta first say, if it wasn't for you and the rest of the instructors, I wouldn't be here. You know, I mean, honestly, everyone at the Denver Flatiron community should be thankful. So I'm really grateful that we had you as part of the journey. I mean, it was. I will say also, like, it was definitely more unique in terms of the fact that compared to other boot camps, but also other cities, you kind of had allowed the students to have a lot of freedom of what they wanted to learn. Was that challenging for you? Because sometimes you would sometimes get like a lot of random like topics to ask, right? What was that like?
1,000%, 1,000%. I think if you've been to enough of my classes, if I ever got stuck, I would just say that's kind of outside the scope of this lesson right now, and I would go probably research it and then hit up whoever asked these questions at some time. But it was definitely challenging, and honestly, that was my biggest fear going into it. Is like, I don't have that 10 years of experience in this field, right? And so I'm going to get questions about that you would only know if you had 10 years of experience in this field, but I think what my specialty was in that was like, I grew up a great bullshitter, don't get me wrong, but I never actually had to use that, right? I was able to let people know, like, hey, let's focus on these things because these will help you get a job in tech right now. But we can talk about those deeper layers as well. Like, I don't know much about computer components and how they're built and how things actually run, right? But I can do React really well, and React can get you a very high-paying job in Slack or in tech. So, yeah, it was challenging, but I was able to definitely work my way out of some of those tough questions. If I didn't know, I'll figure it out with you. And I think that was really important to show people that you don't need to know everything, right? In this field, if you can Google something, you can get your answers. If you ask people, you can get your answers. And if you just take your time and be patient, you can get your answers. And so You don't got to know everything. In fact, there's way too much to learn, but you can always be learning. So
That's a true statement.
yep,
I completely agree. I completely agree with that. You got to have patience in this industry. I think that's what people don't realize they walk into, is like they're like frustrated with their code, and then give up really easily. But a lot of the students I work with, I'm also a bootcamp instructor now. Um, they worry about like a tech stack that they're learning, and they're like, especially like Flatiron School, they're like, oh, like Ruby on Rails, like I don't see any jobs for that. Should I be worried about? Do you think tech stack matters when you're in the beginning stage? What do you think?
That's a great question. First off, congrats on becoming a bootcamp instructor.
Oh, thanks.
I feel like it is a very fast track to learning a lot. You learn a lot in having to teach other people. So shout out to you on that journey. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
And as far as tech stack, honestly, I don't think it matters as much, right? There are some languages that are easier to learn than others, for sure. But in this process of trying to jump into tech and be a software engineer, you have to always be learning. And I don't think it really matters in the beginning where you start, right? If you learn what some people consider the hardest language to start off with, that'll just make the rest of your career a little bit easier, right? I'm not gonna say it's gonna be easy, but it might make it a little bit easier, right? But I don't think it really matters. I know JavaScript is probably like one of the best ones to start with, just because of its flexibility. You can kind of write as much as you want and do whatever, but that could lead to you writing this Wild West code, right? Whereas if you start with something a little more structured, that, like, let's say Rails, for example, or we can even go like Java, where you have to do things a very particular way, it teaches you structure, right? It teaches you how to write good code and how to follow conventions and make things easily readable for other people. And so there's definitely, I guess there's pros and cons to definitely each language that you may learn. But I think overall, the fact that you are jumping in and learning a language, something that you don't know, and then trying to become proficient at it, is going to help you out in your career, period. So the tech stack to me does not matter. It kind of all depends,
Yeah, I agree. I think in the end, it's about like like the projects, the quality of the projects, and also how proficient you are on whatever language you're gonna get assessed on, right? Is kind
of 1,000%. I mean, like, it's something that we should talk to you all about. Like, once you learn one, then you have this fundamental foundation that goes with every other language. All right. Every language has loops. Every language has some type of iterables. Every language has if-else statements or conditionals, right? And once you learn those basics in one language, you don't really got to relearn those things in the next language, right? You just got to learn how to put it together.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, we all know what hi means, right? But we can say it in many different languages if we learn those languages. But we still know what hi means at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, wherever you start, it's always a good place because it builds a foundation for the next thing. And once you learn your first language, it makes it that much easier to learn your second. Once you learn your second, it makes it that much easier to learn your fifth, right? So.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like it's more like syntactically just a little bit different, and then and you just need to get adjusted to that. But I appreciate that answer a lot. That really resonates with me too. Speaking of which, more people are going into boot camps now. I'm sure Flatiron School, I think they're doing it in person now, from what I heard. And so a lot more people are coming into this industry. And the biggest question is getting that first job. And so from your experience, you jumped right into like a mid-level tier engineer, right?
Yes.
How was that experience like, from an instructor to mid-level?
Yeah, well, so behind the scenes of me being an instructor, I don't know if you know, but I was working for a startup at the same time. So I would spend my days, teaching and running classes, and then after work, I would be coding on a project for a different company. And they were in the construction business, so I was learning a bit about that, as well as just being able to be one of the, only 2 developers working on code. And so moving into my first company was also a smaller startup. I moved into that one, and I kind of went in as a mid-tier over there as well. And going into there, it was only two of us as well, because there just wasn't that many developers at this company. They were starting their hiring process, and I was one of the first ones to come in over there. And of course, that's a lot of challenges with a small startup and all the work that needs to be done, and only a couple engineers. And we eventually end up building up a team. But I learned a whole bunch moving from doing this contract work at one point to now being at a more established startup in that sense.
Okay.
And it wasn't too much of a difference in what I was doing on a daily, right? Because
Mm.
like with teaching, like you said, students would ask me all the time to teach something that I had no idea what it was, and I would
Yeah.
have to figure it out, right? I'm maybe most of the time I just took the morning and I would do an afternoon class, or I would take a whole day to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So jumping in over at like into a code base that's been touched by hundreds of hands over time, and there's just thousands of lines of code,
Yeah.
it was kind of the same. I was learning every day. Like I had to really study what was happening in these functions or in this file, and I was trying to improve at the same time. Like, okay, how can I make this easier for the next person that comes in? And so I was translating the skills that I was teaching you all as
Mm-hmm.
students to I, basically to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
It should be the point. Monkey see, monkey do. I should be teaching and
Yeah.
doing what I'm teaching, right? So it was a very interesting transition, but I think at the end of the day, the similarity was that I was still learning every day. I didn't know everything, so you got to dive into it. You got to be able to talk with people. You got to be not afraid to ask questions. Because I think a lot of us as developers try to like really stay so close to our computer, where we get so close into focusing on some idea that we're trying to make happen, that we kind of lose out on the bigger picture. And asking questions to the right people is the way to kind of get past that sometimes. So transition was definitely different. I wasn't dealing with as many people on the daily
Mm-hmm.
as I was teaching, like 20 something students at one time. It's now just I'm an individual contributor, kind of focused on my work, and that was fun for me. It's actually what I was looking for as I was coming out of teaching. I was like, I just want to take time to like code and just do my own thing, where dealing with people all day is it's a lot. It's heavy, especially with transitioning, right? People are going from being the greatest physician or chemist or whatever, and now they're coming into coding, and it's a completely new culture shock for them. So you're not just teaching somebody how to code; you're teaching somebody how to change their way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and build confidence in themselves, and all these little things that make up a software engineer, right? And it was
Absolutely.
nice to take a break from that, I will
Yeah,
say.
absolutely. There it's so interesting because teaching is uniquely challenging compared to also how challenging it is like what you're doing now, right? It's completely two different beasts, right? Like one side, you don't really know what you're going to get asked, and you kind of have to figure things out on the fly, and then you're kind of doing the same thing, but no one's really like watching you. You only have like you pretty much have a window of time that you have more
Yeah.
flexibility to work with too.
Mhm.
But that is awesome to hear that you are where you're at now. And I'm glad that you said you worked at a startup because my first job out of Flatiron School was also a startup. I really loved it. You learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
Um, but people are scared because I always encourage people, if you want to learn and get your hands dirty, go work for a startup because, like you really have a bigger impact on the bottom line and people are scared. What is your experience so far? Especially you said that you've been in the same type, team size of two. Like, what's has been the time period to get yourself picked up to like get to the point where like I can start contributing and all that.
For sure, for sure. Man, luckily I will say that my time teaching played a huge part in me being able to get up to speed quickly at this startup, because they use React and Node, right? Node for the back end, some old loopback 3 is like some old Node framework, and then React on the front end. And when I did my interviews, I was a React beast at this point. Like I finished the interview so quick, they were like, "Man, you've done that faster than people with 10 years of experience in this stuff." I'm like, you don't understand the things y'all had me. You know what? I even tell you, Tony. What they had me do was create a counter.
Uh huh.
Like that was my go-to to teach you all. Like,
Yeah.
let's build
Yeah.
ducks and stuff like this.
Yeah.
And then they had me like make some make some people show up, like users show up on the screen. So basically, I'm using like use effect and all these things and it was something I've done 1,000 times while
Yeah.
teaching. So I ran through it so fast, and even when going into the job, like there was, I guess, I was kind of bringing a new feel to the React because it was kind of stuck in the old class based way, whereas now we're like doing hooks and having functional components and all this stuff. So for me, it was fun because I'm like, okay, every file I touch, I can now upgrade, right, and move it into this
Yeah.
new. I can change the way Redux is being used. I don't got to use this higher order component, all this stuff. But doing it, like the repetitiveness of teaching, actually just made me that much more comfortable when I jumped over there. So even us being only a team of two, I felt really good about what I was doing. And then my first project there was actually, I got to lead a project solely by me. Like the idea was there and the product description of what needed to happen was there. But I pretty much, they gave me some code and it was like, this is what the last person did. You can use this or you can start from scratch. And I was like, no, I'm starting from scratch because
Awesome.
this is my chance to show what I'm capable of, as well as establish some new patterns because the code base was kind of all over the place. So I'm like, cool, we can make some good design patterns here. And of course, you got to back that up with fact. You can't just make up your things. Like I was using documentation to show like this is what they recommend. That's why I did this, so on and so forth. And it put me in a good place for working over there. But yeah, it was definitely a nice change in transition, I will say.
Yeah, it sounds like like they found the right person. Like couldn't find any perfect person better than the React King here. I mean, I definitely love it from you too. So
For sure.
I started in the back end. So are you currently just doing pure front end work right now?
Oh, so I'm full stack now.
Okay.
I guess I didn't say where I'm at now. So I work for Handshake nowadays, if you've heard of that. And Handshake essentially is a place where you could consider it a marketplace for students to help find jobs, right? The
Okay.
goal is to help all college students get equal opportunities, right, for
Oh,
careers
awesome.
or for jobs.
Very
So
cool.
our students come in, there's jobs posted, and everybody can look for these jobs, right? And which is awesome because for me, coming from a boot camp and then moving into this type of role, like I'm still kind of doing the same thing, just
Hmm.
behind the scenes now, being able to code. But it's full stack work. I am one of the more stronger front end people on my specific team. So I do tend to pick up those a little bit more or help people with those tickets. But I touch both. I touch back end, I write migrations and all that stuff too. We deal with Elasticsearch, we do Rails, we have React on the front end, TypeScript, just pretty much all the goods.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm also full stack right now, and I'll be honest. I used to just purely focus on backend. It's a little overwhelming to do both. Like in like a Flatiron setting where you're just working on your project, it was like, oh, it's manageable. But oh my gosh, like at least in my experience, like how do you feel? Do you feel like a lot of junior devs ask like, should I go for full stack or like front end, back end? I always say like whatever you feel like you can like make the most effort without any help on the internet. Is I think your specialty you should go for. That's what I always tell them all the time.
I hear
So what
you.
is your
Yeah, I think. Well, for me, I think I'm pretty evenly skilled across the two. But when it comes to optimizing things, uh, I'm probably a lot better on the front end for sure. I'm not even probably. I'm hands down a lot better on the front end. But it's because it's my focus, right?
yeah,
I enjoy seeing what I'm doing. Right? I
yeah,
like want to watch. I type this and this thing's 2 pixels off. I know how to move that over. This is loading weird or it's taking too long over here. I know how to
yeah.
make that faster. I like to see things that the user is seeing, right? I like to build that, and that helps me try to look into more like articles and maybe Medium blogs about how to optimize the front end because I'm interested in it, right? But skill wise, I can't say that I could do the same thing on the back end. I get a little bored with it.
Mm,
And by being bored with it, I don't dive into it as much because I'm like, who cares about that stuff? Leave that to the people who love data, right?
yeah.
Um, so I do find that kind of like what you said, like whatever you can do without needing the help of the internet is probably your specialty. But I think it's what motivates you, what gets you
Mm,
out of
that's a
bed,
good one.
like what
Yeah.
problems do you like to solve? Because You got, I mean, as a developer, that's all we're doing all day. We're just solving problems all day, right?
Yeah.
But which ones don't feel like problems? Which ones feel like puzzles, right? Which ones are just, making the brain, be intrigued by what's happening.
Yeah.
That's where I like to focus my attention. And I think that kind of works for most people too.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of puzzles, I always tell people coding is like puzzles, where like you finish a puzzle by night and someone just tears it up, and like the next morning you have to start all over again. So that's a funny
Yep. Yep.
comparison on it.
Or they just keep putting them right next to each other. So you finish one, and go over here and do the next one. And yeah.
Absolutely. One question to kind of help wrap this interview up is, now that you've been in the industry for quite a bit, what kind of tips can you give for boot campers that just graduated? Personally, I think the hardest part, in my opinion, was post boot camp, just because, when we were in the boot camp, we had some pressure, right? Damon, if you saw me like some people slacking, you would kind of pressure them. Like there was some motivation for students, right? I think the post boot camp, it's a cliff fall for a lot of students where they don't have that motivation, so they start kind of like demotivated. They don't code as much. They don't have any sense of direction. I feel like sometimes. What kind of tips can you provide from your experience? I mean, you've had more years of experience teaching too. That successful students do from that.
Yeah. Man, this is one of those questions I knew was going to come, and I felt like I should have wrote something to have ready.
Yeah, they're definitely waiting for this.
I would say that besides getting into resources and things like that, I'll say the very first thing that you must know when you get into this: get comfortable being uncomfortable. All right, like get comfortable being uncomfortable. When you get into this field, you ain't gonna know a thing. All right, half the time, right?
Yeah.
Most of us still don't. I've been in here for a while. I don't know everything all the time, right?
Yeah.
But if you're comfortable being uncomfortable, right, you will be able to figure out anything as you go throughout this journey. You have to understand that every day, as me and Tony have been saying here, is a problem. It's a puzzle. It's something that you have to piece together. You have to look at it from different views sometimes, just to somewhat start half the time. And you got to change your approach to starting sometimes because it doesn't work the same every way. So you're going to be uncomfortable all the time. It's literally like just always jumping out into deep water whenever you're coding. And the less you can be stressed in those times, I think the easier it will be to kind of move forward. Um, and on top of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, have confidence in yourself. You gotta be extremely confident to do this stuff. You have to, and I won't even say extremely, like that's probably a bad choice of words, but you need to have some confidence in yourself to where you can say, I can figure this out. Not that I'm gonna make this happen today at 2 p.m. or I'm gonna finish this by Tuesday. Don't put those restrictions on yourself.
Mhm.
Just have the confidence to say, I will figure this out. I think those two things will help anybody be successful in this field. Like that's kind of one of my big things while I was teaching. Like I didn't come from this background at all, and everybody thought when I was teaching, some people were 10 years older than me, 20 at some point, and they're like, "Man, you've been doing this for a long time." I'm like, nope,
Yeah.
it's been less than a year, right? But what I have been doing for a long time is always throwing myself into new things, and so bringing that into this field definitely helped out a lot. And I think that the majority of people that can find that confidence in themselves and build themselves up, even when everything else may be taking them down, are the people that become the most successful in this, right? Um, and then to give you some resources, I would say always make sure you're studying, doing code problems. Code Wars is a great place to go in and just if you need a quick puzzle for the day, jump into there and it'll definitely get your brain working. And you'll start to find that coding has patterns, and every problem you do is giving you a new pattern that you can go back to when you get the next problem. And as you start watching these patterns, you'll notice that every language, no matter which one you go to, you're solving the same problems in different contexts. And so you'll learn about a stack and you'll realize that I could use a stack for 30 of these problems, but you might
Yeah.
learn something else that, basically just translates across. It transcends your language and it just translates across all of them. Coding as a genre.
Mhm.
watch the patterns, practice things like Code Wars, jump into Udemy courses for new languages you want to learn. Try to build a framework from scratch so that you understand how it works under the hood. Things like that are going to have you build you a nice skill set to know, like, oh, all these things work this way, or all these things work that way. And you'll start to have those boxes in your head that you can always pull from. And it's like just, having that magic hat with all these tricks up your sleeve.
That's awesome. That was like the $1 million answer that I was looking for. That was amazing. Pretty much everything. Just consistency is key, like you mentioned. And I know this is kind of cliche, but Rome wasn't built in a day, so isn't your path as a software engineer, right? So it's the consistency, but I 100% agree. Confidence. And part of it too is because you can say a lot of false things, but if you sound confident, people are going to psychologically believe you. Not that I done that before, but like confident people will sound like they're trustworthy, and it just makes you believe. You're like, wow, okay, like he sounds right, whatever that may be. So, that was a lot of good quality, tips that you gave to the boot campers, and I appreciate you sharing your story today, Damon. Really, truly grateful to have you on, and giving your perspective on what it's like to, especially coming from different backgrounds, especially yours from instructor and then to full-time software engineer. And also, thankful for being part of the community I also was part of as well with the Flatiron School. And so glad that, we could rejoin here today at the podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me, Tony. Anytime you want me to come back, you let me know.
Oh, awesome. Definitely will do.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess for anybody that may be watching this or has any questions or any of that stuff, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Tony will put my LinkedIn or something attached to this, but you can find me as Damon Chivers pretty much anywhere. And feel free to ask, man. I'm always here and available for y'all.
Awesome. And thank you, Damon. And for the ones that are watching and in the future, his LinkedIn is attached to this summary. So definitely go say thank you to that. This will cap up the podcast today, but appreciate you so much, Damon. Thank you
so much, Tony. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, see you, everyone. Bye.